Hi there, I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Delighted to welcome you to today's session, which is entitled See More, Stop More, Win More, How Human Brought Down Scylla. Your presenters today include Adam Sell, Senior Research Editor at Human, and Ina Vasileva, Senior Reverse Engineer and Technical Threat Intelligence Researcher, also at Human. Put a background on today's discussion. Fighting fraud is not dissimilar from Child's connect the dots activity. Instead of dragging a crayon from one strategically numbered dot to another, fraud fighters are connecting online signals. Human's Satori Threat Intelligence and Research team works with Human's immense internet visibility to paint these pictures every day. They work with ecosystems partners and Human's immense internet visibility to identify and disrupt fraud schemes. In 2019, Satori announced a fraudulent apps investigation named Poseidon, resulting in Google removing the apps from their Play Store. However, new variations of the scheme popped up in recent years, which the team recently announced to the market, calling it Scylla, after the grandchild of Poseidon. So in this session today, our security experts will talk about the details of these fraud scheme operations, the means with which the operators morphed to grow and avoid detection, what the industry can learn from these disruptions, and finally, how to protect against these threats. Now, a little bit about Information Security Media Group. We are a 16-year-old global education and intelligence firm. Our headquarters is in Princeton, New Jersey. You may know us by one or more of our 34 media properties. These include bank info security, healthcare info security, and data breach today. In all, we reach an audience of over 1 million security leaders globally. We give them a daily diet of news, analysis, research, and educational programs exactly like this one. Just a few notes of housekeeping. If you have any questions for our panelists, you can submit them anytime by the chat window on your screen. We likely can't get to every question, but for those questions that we don't answer in the course of the session, we'll get responses back to you directly via email. Should you encounter any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, please take down the email address you see on your screen. If you write to webinars@ismg.io, we've got support staff standing by to help. Also, a reminder, today's webinar is copyrighted material. It's meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you'd like to use any of the information presented today, or if you're looking for customized training materials, please contact us. I'm delighted, of course, to introduce our sponsor, Human Security. Human uses modern defense to safeguard organizations from bot attacks and fraud, increasing ROI and trust while decreasing customer friction, data contamination, and cybersecurity exposure. Human collects more than 2,500 signals from every browser or mobile device that connects to your web application, crunches these data through more than 350 algorithms to proactively reach that single critical decision, bot or not. Human combines superior detection techniques, internet scale observability, and hacker intelligence to make bot or no bot decisions with no impact on page load times or friction on end users. With the scale and speed, it can mitigate today and tomorrow's sophisticated bots. Let's meet our panelists here. Adam, of course, is Senior Research Editor for Human. In this role, he helps uncover and develop content based on original research. And this includes investigations by the Satori Threat Intelligence and Research team and trend research by the Human Insights team. He manages the disclosure and publication processes for that content. He's been at Human since April of 2019 and was the second marketing-focused person on a team that has since grown to more than 30. Ina is a Senior Reverse Engineer and Technical Threat Intelligence Researcher at Human, helping detect and prevent advanced bots, malware fraud, and protecting the internet. She specializes in malware analysis, reverse engineering, threat intelligence, network analysis, threat hunting, ethical hacking, and cryptography. With that, let me turn you over now to Ina and to Adam. Folks, center stage is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to share some slides that Ian and I have pulled together on the Scylla investigation so that we can demonstrate to everybody exactly what it was that we found and how cool it was that we got to go and find it and have the opportunity to tell this story. So as mentioned, the title of this presentation is See More, Stop More, Win More, How Human Brought Down Scylla. My name is Adam Sell, Senior Research Editor at Human. Thank you again, Tom, for that introduction. And joining me is Ina Vasilyeva, our Senior Threat Intelligence Analyst and Reverse Engineer. Brief note about modern defense, which is one of the capabilities that really allowed us to find and help stop the Scylla attack. We safeguard customers by disrupting the economics of cybercrime through modern defense, which is a combination of our unparalleled internet visibility, the network effect that we have through our partnerships, and disruptions like Scylla, which in turn increase the ROI and trust that we have with our partners while decreasing customer friction, data contamination, and cybersecurity exposure. One of those key pillars is our Satori Threat Intelligence and Research team. And our ability to proactively find and disarm threats before they begin to impact our customers and partners is the goal of that team. They're the group that's tasked with shining a light into the dark corners of the internet to find cybercriminals' plans and develop strategies to defend against them. Today, we observe more than 85% of the global digital programmatic advertising ecosystem on the internet, which means that we observe 3 billion unique devices on the internet every month, giving a substantial visibility advantage into bad actor, bot, and fraud activity. And one of the things that I need to emphasize to folks is that the Scylla scheme that we're going to be describing shortly, it is part of a family of ad fraud operations. And the reason that ad fraud is attractive to cyber criminals, you see on the left, the size of the marketplace of digital global programmatic advertising, that as of right now, according to Statista, we're looking at nearly $500 billion a year in global programmatic advertising spending. Within the next 4 years, it's going to rise to almost $725 billion. And on the right-hand side, you'll see this quadrant-style chart that shows you that ad fraud is in a class of its own as an easy scheme for cyber criminals to undertake with a very high payout potential. It often can serve as the bankroll for other more risky fraud operations like you see elsewhere in that chart. And a brief look at some Satori disruptions notable in the past. A couple of years ago, we uncovered the ice bucket scheme, which at its height accounted for 28% of all connected TV traffic that passed through the Human Defense platform. Connected TV is, think about your Amazon Fire Stick, your Roku, your smart TV, the platforms on which the streaming services that you love so dearly operate. And then similarly, last year, we uncovered Pareto, in which the perpetrators were spoofing more than 6,000 different apps as a part of the scheme, and were operating on more than 1 million infected Android phones. And a look at what the impact of a disruption can be, the final day of the Pareto operation, when we worked closely with our partners to take down their command and control servers, you can see the traffic going from these spiky bits here to 0 after the disruptive action that we led with our partners. So to begin to talk about the Scylla operation, it dates back actually to 2019, when Ina and other investigators on our Satori team published research into an investigation we called Poseidon. The following year, in 2020, we uncovered a similar operation that we were able to determine was by the same threat actors that we named Charybdis. Charybdis being the daughter of Poseidon. And then this year, 2022, we uncovered a new scheme, again, by the same threat actors, which we've named Scylla as the granddaughter of Poseidon, showing the generational change from one version of this operation to the next and our ability to continue to find it. These attacks targeted a number of SDK, software development kits, within apps on both Google's Play Store and Apple's App Store. And the way that Scylla worked, actually a brief description of Scylla here. Scylla was a collection of 89 apps on both of those marketplaces, all of which were committing a few different flavors of ad fraud. The apps in question amassed more than 13 million downloads among them over the span of their activity on both of these stores. And this is, as mentioned, the third wave of an attack that we first reported on in 2019. And each time that we've found them, they've adapted their tactics to try to cover their tracks a little bit better and perpetuate the fraud a little bit longer. Ina, would you like to tell us a little bit about some of the more technical details about the threat scope and history of Scylla?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Adam, for the introduction of the team as well as the this campaign. So Scylla, the fraud behind the this operation, this last way for the whole scope of the same fraud actor that is performing this activity. The last one was precisely involving the out of context ad render, which is the hidden ads, which is the ads that you don't see on your screen, which is can be behind the screen, or using the web views, or sort of like you can think about it like as a tabs in your browser, which you in this case you can even able to see them or open it. It's just in the background rendering the ads, which are not visible to the user, as well as the manipulative behavior like the spoof clicks or spoof video events, as well as the spoof app IDs where they mimicking our other apps to perform some of the malicious activity, and the intellectual property theft where the threat actor will steal the whole apps and recompile them to do some productivity that they precisely targeted for the particular apps. The scope was, as you already mentioned, there was 89 apps, 80 Android apps and 9 iOS apps. And some of the apps have about 1 million downloads each. And this threat was active just recently, the third wave on about 2022. And this threat actor is continuing to evolving and still updating their techniques and procedures, as well as what type of applications they are operating on. And if we to talk about the threat profile, the Charybdis as well as Scylla applications take advantage of the legitimate looking mobile apps or games to install it self or by the user on the devices. In one go, it hurt the original developer as well as the user, and any traffic generated from those apps can be considered invalid since the game is stolen. As well as there is the performance of the fraud activity as well. The configuration information as well that we obtained from the static and dynamic analysis makes it harder to block it deterministically, but those applications also communicate for the C2, and when the application is running on the device, it will communicate with the C2 server to pass the configuration of the particular fraud activity that it was selected in real time for the particular application and device. And each of the packet within traffic that goes back and forth from device to the C2 will have the activation trigger that will determine which type of the fraud will be selected. The categories that I mentioned earlier will be hidden ads, fake clicks, or something else. All just be like the abusive behavior of the application. Those applications all impersonate other games. So in the traffic, you'll see completely different app ID rather than the one that is installed on the device. And as well as they have the timers for the when to perform the fake clicks or to render the hidden ads. So for example, there is the application needs to be installed for the particular time on the phone to be able to actually trigger the activity, like the fraudulent activity. And as well as the last step of the fraud, or I would say scheme, is to select which SDK they gonna target, which SDK, the ad network SDK will be the victim of ad fraud, which ads will be selected. And all those applications communicate through the similar C2 activities, both for the Android and the iOS. And if you go further, the first screenshot, as you can see here, is the like how the threat actor obfuscate the techniques, tempting us to analyzers and researchers to less being detected. They customize the classes and code the way that will be hard for us to search statically. So we need to run the application dynamically to determine what are the particular strings or methods in the code and classes are triggered by the activity and which are responsible for the particular actions. And also they use obfuscation methods to obfuscate the code that will be not readable, not looks like its original code. So it will be scrambled pieces of text or numbers, which is not readable unless you decrypt it and read it later on, but it will be more precise text. As well as the threat actor was used the encryption to encrypt the C2 communications.
I also wanted to add to the conversation here that this is a key way that the attack has evolved over time. In the original wave, the Poseidon wave, the level of obfuscation was fairly low. And as the attackers moved on to the Charybdis stage and now to the Scylla stage, they've introduced more obfuscation techniques like the ones you can see here that Enos just described, which have made it increasingly difficult for the Satori team to find these fraud operations, but they're not so sophisticated that they've been able to cover their tracks completely.
Yes, exactly. If we go further on the next slide, as you can see, one of the key points of our research was to be able to identify across platforms, basically to attribute that this attack is like all the applications that we found on Android and iOS are coming from the same threat actor, and the similarities was not just with the C2 infrastructures, but also the most solid evidence was the encryption algorithm that they use, as well as the keys. And as you can see from the slides, from the screenshots rather, on the top one is the Android one, and the bottom one is the for iOS. They use the NAS encryption as well as the base 64 encoding, sorry, for the Android. And the key encryption key was the first 8 characters of the app ID. So this was created to encrypt the inside of the application. And even though the JSON structure changes slightly from app to app and from platform to platform, there is still a lot of configuration parameters that has the both messages as well as the evidence of the similarities and the high confidence that is coming from the same threat actor. And also, there is a lot of domains associated with this threat attack, but also even though there is many of them, there is a batch of the IP addresses that are similar and basically same for both of the platforms. And if you go further, some of the interesting point of this third wave of this campaign was that the threat actors starting to use the iOS. Before, we only seen their activity on the Android devices, and this third was very interesting, but because they started to use iOS. For now, it's just 9 apps, but I would say that we will see more apps on the iOS. And the interesting part was how they generated the rating for their applications to make them more popular. It's not the populous games or like applications, but they need to have some audience so people will download it naturally. And some of the interesting part was to see like they generated the probably automated generation with using bots or something like that to generate the comment section. And one of the interesting part was those 4 phrases that was most common among all of the applications, among all of the comment sections across all the games or applications for iOS precisely. And it was game optimization or the optimized experience, etc. I guess the most interesting one, what is the fraud behavior? So we talked about the profile, but what is like what have they done? So I'll start with the hidden ads. So what you can see right now on the screen happening at the same time. The first screenshot or a video is what is happening on the screen when the user will open the application. At the same time, in the middle section, this is the web views that is rendering in the background or the foreground, which is rendering the ad. Some of them are pre-cached that will be seen by the user naturally. And we'll consider like a valid advertisement where the it will be shown to the user and the user will actually see it. But the majority of the advertisement that you can see the evidence of will be hidden in the background using the web views in this case. And the last section is remember I was talking about the triggers and flags that are used to determine which type of fraud will be selected. And as you can see, probably it's hard to see, it's a really small font, but at the bottom of the 8th line of the capture, there is the WB and W flags at the end, which is basically the flags of the triggers that will precisely trigger the hidden ads. There's other flags or triggers that are associated with different types of fraud, but for the hidden ads, it will be WB.
To also briefly shout out that in this middle section here with the web views, there is some information that has been redacted here because, as Ina mentioned earlier, this is an ongoing attack, and we want to preserve our ability to follow research leads to find whatever the next stage of this attack might be. So there will be a couple of screenshots in this and future slides where it looks as though information might be missing. That's because we've redacted it to preserve research leads for the Satori team.
Yeah. Okay, so continue with the hidden ads. So this is the output of Reader, which is the tool we use to debug or modify the applications. And this is the specific breakdown that was edited to the backdoor SDK package for one of the SDKs. And we can observe the call chain happening in the background. So we, and look, on my team, created specific mechanism and script to trigger those activities to make sure that the hidden acts actually hidden. And we were triggered to avoid waiting time as well as wasting of the analyst time and our resources. We had to trigger some of the activities, and we were able to trigger some of the activities to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to. And in the red triangular, not triangular, rectangular, but you can see some of the parameters of the advertisement that the user is supposed to see, but it wasn't able to see. It was all on the web view in the background. And if you go to the next slide. So here is the another type of fraud called the automatic clicks or fake clicks. So the first screenshot are the static signals for the code that generates the parameters and checks for the conditions of the fake clicks. And note that all of the strings of these functions are always encrypted with XOR, and we decrypted it with the strings, so it's more obvious or like readable. And on the bottom is the output of our custom debugger to trace in a call to on measure, which is the call of the web view, and click being dispatched with the XY parameters. And as you can see, they use the parameters that was collected before. How they collected this? So remember I told that there is still some native ads that will be still visible for the user. So all of these ads will actually be used to collect information from the user. So all the information that is collected related to how the user will watch if it's a video ad, for how many seconds the user watched it, how they close it immediately, they close it, what clicks they made on the screen. So it's like all of the, like, so this is the phone. So like all the clicks that made on the device will be precisely mathematically stored and sent back to the C2 for later on to use. Why? Because they don't want to be detected. They want to mimic the human activity as much as possible. So we, as the like researchers or analysts or any automated detection mechanism, won't be able to detect them because, like, you know how the bots work. So look, it's basically milliseconds how they perform the actions. Here, when they mimic as much as possible to human activity, it's really hard to determine if it's a bot or not. So we don't want to block the activity which is coming from the human, right? So we need to make sure that it's coming from the bot. In this case, it was really hard to determine because they really try really hard to make sure that we not see them as bots. And if you go further, the next part is how they actually performed the stealing property of the other developers. And as you can see from the screen is divided, and it's true for both platforms, Android and iOS. From on one side, there is the original application that was developed. It has no fraud activity. It was developed by a legitimate developer. It was uploaded to stores, has some of the activities and all of the ads that you see on the original app is legitimate, native, and no fraud activity whatsoever. On the other side, it's exactly the same apps. As you can see, the fraud actor even done very similar screenshots. The difference is only with the developer name and the slight difference with the name of the application. But the majority, I will talk about the game later on, but the majority of the stuff that is created by the original developer is basically was stolen by the fraud actor. And all the applications on Scylla operation was coming from the independent developer, which means basically one applications come from one developer, not like one developer upload like 15 applications at a time. So it was really hard to find all the developers as well. And if we go further, so the insides of the application, as you can see, the same, the screen divided, the original app, the Scylla app, the modified one. As you can see, the application is identical. The only difference is in the original app, you can see the banner with the advertisement, which is supposed to be there and is correctly monetized, and everything goes to ad networks and the developers as well. On the other side is Scylla application. The game is the same, but as you can see, there is no banners. But all of the advertisement is still going, and even though you don't see the banners can be displayed on the web view on the foreground, but you don't see. And those fraud actors precisely use web views mostly, but there is also option to use basically to render the advertisement off screen. So basically, when you're writing the code to measure the device's dimensions and then just render it outside of those dimensions to make sure that it's not on the screen. And if you go further, I think the applications that we see has different SDKs that they selected for as their victims. And the total traffic pre-bid was the 24 million requests in 1 month. And the daily traffic was increasing from 600K to 1.2 million requests per day, and it was per application. And all of this related to ad spoofing. And if we go further, the app ID spoofing is also happening. Remember, I mentioned that the application that is installed on the device is not necessarily the one that will be used to commit the fraud. So the application that is installed on the device will be also has all the malicious components, but the one that will render all the traffic associated with this fraud attack is completely different application. And as you can see on the screenshots for the Android and iOS, the application that is installed in this case was the Sexy Lady application for the Android, but in the traffic, in all of the communications with these two and the ad networks was the Click Heroes. The same with the iOS, the Runner family for the iOS that was installed on the device. In the traffic, in all the evidence, it will be turnarounds gain. And it's on a screenshot, it's hardly visible, but it's basically the traffic snapshots of how they actually perform in the spoof app IDs. And if you go further, here is another key features that we was able to obtain is basically a web view mentioning the painting war in paper game from the application. As you can see here, right about in the middle, which is supposed to be coming from the Scylla app. And as you can see, it's even to have this word hidden. So even in the web view, you'll see that this web view is hidden. It's not visible to the user. And below is the Scylla application shared preferences, the local database, as well as the application state, which is referencing the in-paper game and all the settings that is needed for the C2 server. And go further. So the not so happy ending, the disruption. So the disruption of basically anything consists of tremendous steps. It's like a Spanish ladder that you need to climb. It's like a lot of steps involved, and it's not just finding the threat actor, combine all the evidence. It's a lot of things that come together, and it's also collective. It's not when we are like alone and do stuff. It's a collective effort when we coming together with the customers as well as the law enforcement and sometimes even users when we notify them that there is something happening on their devices. When we come out together and trying to disrupt those activities, and it's involved a lot of stuff from legal to the researchers to the technical component to the publications like the blog posts or like webinars like this. For this specific actor, they are still active, but what we've done to protect the customers as well as the users, we provided all the TTPs, which is the procedures and tactics of the threat actor, to our key partners as well as the effective platforms, which is not all of them are necessarily our customers, as well as the YARA rules for both the iOS and Android, which they can deploy like customers as well as the stores that can, like the app stores that can deploy those YARA rules to detect such activity later on. And also we were notify Google as well as Apple to remove all the apps from the stores, and all of us are not affecting users anymore. And we are conducting webinars like this, publish blog posts, and doing the media coverage as much as possible to make sure that users as well as our customers and notified. But also we keep an eye on the threat actor to make sure that as much as they evolve, we always find them.
So I would want to jump in for a moment and reemphasize that the reason that we're able to see attacks like Scylla, Charybdis, Poseidon, and in earlier stories that we mentioned, Pareto and Ice Bucket, and anything else that we continue to look for is because human has the world's largest bot sensor network at its disposal to gather signal and find where this fraud is hiding. It's only because we're able to see 20 trillion digital interactions that we verify each week, 3 billion distinct devices that we're observing every month, and 10 years worth of signal history. That's what gives us the intelligence and the insight to be able to develop the 2,500 signals that Ina mentioned, and the 350 algorithms we use to determine whether or not something is fraud or legitimately human activity. And the moral of the story here is that if you can see more, you can stop more, and therefore you can win more, and that we will help find fraud before it finds you. And here we've got a little extra information for you. The QR code on your screen there will take you to some more information about the Scylla attack. And you can see here on the right-hand side how we've helped share the word about what we found and how we stopped it. And with that, I would love to kick it back to Tom for any questions that have come in over the course of the presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Beautiful, Adam. Thank you so much. Ina, thank you as well. Really appreciate your insight you shared today. And as you say, we have the opportunity to take some questions now. I want to remind our attendees, if you have questions you haven't submitted yet, do so now by the chat window on your screen. Can't get to every question, but for those that we don't answer within the course of this session, we'll respond via email. That said, first question I have, folks, what would a real takedown of these fraudsters look like? And why wouldn't they just keep adapting and creating new ways of attacks in perpetuity?
Ina, I seem to recall that early in the presentation, we had a chart that showed activity when we were able to take down Pareto. Can you give a brief description of what it was like? What were the steps that we took to bring Pareto down, and why that might not be an option this time?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so basically Pareto botnet was the nearly one like million infected Android devices, pretended to be millions of people watching ads on a smart TV or other devices, causing invalid traffic of streaming platforms. And it was stated with the like 650 million daily beats request. And with the Pareto, it's not really similar to Scylla. It's a little bit different, but even though it has the Android applications, right? But it's a little bit different. And so basically, like how it's like, I guess outside like from step one to step XYZ depends. So first of all, we need to find the threat. As soon as we identify the threat, we need to back up with the evidence, find the cluster of the applications, find all the victims, all the involved parties, as well as who are responsible for that. And if we're lucky, we can attribute this to the particular threat actor. If we're not so lucky, we can at least disrupt the C2 infrastructure so they won't perform such activity later on. So it's not usually we need the face behind the attack. Sometimes we can disrupt the botnet just by disrupting the infrastructure. It's not like Imitat, where it's a huge like malware infrastructure, where it's, even when you disrupt the infrastructure, it will not go down because it will always come back. And hopefully not always, but history tells otherwise. So here, as soon as we disrupted the infrastructure, it's pretty much over. Depends on the, I guess, the financial background of the threat actor, how they can get up from the knees after the takedown. And as soon as we got all the evidence, in case with the Pareto, it was the collective effort. So it was not just us, but the other customers, as well as the partners in this. I think we call it the human collective.
That's right.
So it's a lot of companies involved, as well as where we stand together to protect the internet, as well as the ecosystem, to make sure that everything that user sees and all the advertisement that provided to the devices are actual legitimate native, not the related to fraud. So you're not like having those applications, like as from user perspective, you would care, like you have like a bunch of applications. Do you know like what's happening with all these advertisements, all of their games, all the application has them, and do you really know where all the money goes? Are you sure that some of this can be related to fraud activity? And as like it sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's like just a peak of the iceberg, the ad fraud, but all this money is actually feeding other organized crime and cybercrime, that is can be like human trafficking and just like basically anything. So it starts with a just small thing like the ads on your phone, but if you think about it, it's like a little bit globally, it will actually be like really, it's a really big problem. And we got together with our partners, Google, Roku, and others, as well as the law enforcement, to take down the botnet. And as soon as we got all the evidence and the prosecution, we were able to technically take down the C2, and then we are in the process, I think still in the process, to have the actual legal prosecution of the threat actor. But in the past, if you followed our company successes, we had Eve, where we actually got the person responsible for the bot activity to the jail. So the justice is right there. It's just the, with all the legal stuff, it's a little bit slow, but we get in there. And something like this is like with Scylla precisely is, I would see eventually we will take them down completely. And as they're adjusting really, they're really smart and adjusting from every time we find them. And it's really fascinating for me as a researcher to see how they learn from the mistakes. And I remember when we first published the blog post, they basically immediately changed their procedures. That's when we stopped publishing for a while, just to make sure. So that's why you haven't seen the blog post for the second one. But now, like when we're with the third wave, we decided that we need to do the good stuff. We need to publish it to know everyone, to let everyone know that here's the application that you don't need on your phone and what they do. And this is one of the first steps that are associated with the takedown, but it's a long road to the, like, which is usually comes with the law enforcement when we take down physically as well as logically the botnets.
And to answer the second part of the question about what might preclude them from continuing to adapt this scheme into new forms, it becomes an economic question that for any fraud scheme, once it's live, there's a window. There is a window of opportunity between when the scheme is launched and when it's detected and disrupted. And the work that we're doing is to try and shorten that window as much as we possibly can, because there is still an opportunity cost to the fraudster to develop and uncover and find these new mechanisms that will get past any defenses that have been staged. So if we shorten the window of opportunity for them, it's going to make it even less profitable for them in the long run, which in turn makes it less attractive of an option for them to go for. So if the Poseidon stage was active for X number of months and the Charybdis stage was active for Y number of months and the Scylla stage for Z number of months, they may no longer be able to turn a profit on the activity that they're conducting with whatever the next stage would be, which would in turn force them to look elsewhere and effectively shut down the operation.
Second question I have for you folks, did the attackers target anything in particular, certain apps, certain advertisers?
It changed from one phase of the operation to the next. In the Poseidon operation, it was pretty scattershot. They weren't really going after any particular SDK. It was really just try to hit everybody at once. My recollection is that in the Charybdis stage, they focused very heavily on one specific SDK. And then they re-expanded a bit so that in the Scylla stage of the operation, there were 5, 6, I think, different SDKs that were named and targeted specifically. You saw in the presentation the apps that were being cloned and infected, as it were, with this code. They weren't apps necessarily that you or I might have heard of or might even have on our devices. The goal wasn't to take the most popular apps in the world, clone them and insert code. The goal was to take apps that have some downloads, but that are easy enough to rip and replace elements of the code. So that's how they managed to get to 13 million downloads.
One more question for you. How would I know if I have an app doing this on my phone now?
First of all, make sure that you install all applications from official stores, not from the third parties. This is the first one. And like as soon as you notice something weird on your phone, like it's overheating, it's the battery is drained, basically. Like you used to have like the battery that lasts for a whole day, now it's half a day. There is something happening on your phone. So what you can do is to recall what you installed recently and uninstall it. Some of the applications are harder to uninstall, especially if they have some fraudulent activity. You need to go to the, not just like from the home pane, uninstall, which is the easiest part. You actually need to go to the settings and go to the apps and then uninstall it. It's a little bit hard for the majority of the users. So I hope everybody knows at this point, but sometimes there are still some complications of how uninstall specifically the fraudulent activity apps. And do not install flashlights. Come on, we have flashlights already, so we don't need them as standalone applications. The applications like the antivirus VPNs, which is the most like the popular ones, do not install them. Only if you trust them, like the one that you paid subscriptions for, and it's a trusted, the well-known application that, again, coming from the official store. And Besides that, do not install some of the games that is advertised in the ads that you see on the other applications, because some of those activities are paid by the threat actors or cybercriminal activity that are basically targeting the audience, how they actually know. It's like usually like the arcades, the ones that you could look like the old-fashioned games, or like the like walking or shooting games, which is easy to install. It's like the people like them, people install them. It's pretty much one click away. And as soon as you click, especially inside of the app in advertisements, it's not usually goes directly to the App Store, even though it seems like the App Store. It's not usually the case. So you need to take a lot of attention what is going on in your phone and just recollect everything. And I would say the majority will be like the two signs are the battery and the overheating. Some applications will do this overnight, so they will record for a couple of days your daily activity, and they will know like when is your sleeping hours, and they will perform the fraud activity when you sleep. So they know when you sleep and they perform the stuff. So when you wake up in the morning, your battery is drained. Why? Because they knew that you were sleeping. So they do all this crazy stuff on your phone, so you won't notice it.
It's like Santa Claus. They see you when you're sleeping. They know when you're awake.
Yeah.
And if you're curious about the apps associated specifically with Poseidon, Charybdis, Scylla, we do have a list of all of those apps available in the content that we published about the investigations.
Excellent. Adam, again, thank you so much. Appreciate your insight you shared today, and thanks for taking these questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
I also want to thank our attendees. We welcome you. We know you took time out of your day to attend this session. We're grateful for that. And I do trust that you walk away from today's discussion with some new insights, some new ideas, and some new data points with which you and your organization can be even better prepared to tackle the forms of fraud we talked about here today. I look forward to seeing you again at one of our upcoming sessions. And until then, for Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you for your time and attention.